This is YouTuber Jim Browning hacking into a scammer's PC. The scammer is impersonating a bank after having sent an automated message to a victim in which transactions are falsely claimed to have been charged to their account, and they're told they need to speak to an advisor to have them cancelled. Recordings like these, which Jim gets by secretly listening on calls, are heartbreaking. A woman can be heard crying as she's emotionally manipulated by a scammer, well rehearsed in the act of getting victims to part with their money. He convinces her that the zero balance she sees for her account is fine and that the correct balance will be restored soon, despite that obviously not being the case, and ensures she doesn't speak to anyone else about it so as to not compromise the scam. Through the sheer volume of calls they send out and the huge amount of money to be made, scammers are able to find those who are most vulnerable and deceive them into emptying their savings. It really is quite sickening. But Jim is something of a hero. The work he does is incredible and satisfying to watch, hence why he has 4.4 million subscribers and videos that get millions, even tens of millions of views. In this instance, victims send boxes full of cash to the scammers in the belief that their bank will securely put this money in a new, safe account. Yes, I know, this may sound ridiculous to you. Unfortunately for the scammers though, Jim was able to retrieve the parcel tracking numbers from the scam's computer and pass this information on to UK police, who ultimately intercept them. He's even able to get the personal details of the scammers, including their photos and contact details. Jim is something of a pioneer too, having inspired numerous creators who post content in a similar vein, which many of us, maybe even you, get a great deal of satisfaction out of. But while this might seem like an unquestionably positive endeavour, are there more complexities to scam interception and scam baiting than there might seem? This is the internet eating itself, and let's get into it. If you feel like everything's a scam these days, you're not alone. Inflation's pushing prices up, while sizes get smaller. Everything has ridiculous fees attached to it. We're tricked into buying unnecessary features and warranties. Everything falls apart shortly after buying it. Insurance companies look for every excuse not to pay out. Politicians say they'll do one thing and do another. Bills and everyday expenses seem to get higher while making a living gets harder. Everyday people feel like they're being squeezed from every angle by a world that drains them of every penny it can. Almost half of Americans don't have 3 months of emergency savings, and the UK has been in a cost of living crisis for years now. And on top of all of that, we have to deal with a constant onslaught of illegal scams, which feel more pervasive than ever. 2/3 of Australians report being targeted by online scams, with a quarter falling victim to them. Evolving technology makes it near impossible to keep up, with new scams being invented all the time, as scammers seek new ways to extract money from victims. In a 2025 survey from McAfee titled The State of the Scammerverse, a sizable chunk of those surveyed encountered many of the different types of scams asked about, covering things like fake shipping notifications, account verification scams, fake invoices, and friendly texts from wrong numbers that lead into investment scams. This is partly down to a false sense of security, with 36% of consumers believing that you can only be a victim of online scams if you share too much online, while 62% also agree to some extent that those who fall for romance scams are those who are easily fooled. Even senior government officials and business people are fooled by scams, such as the CEO of a small Kansas bank who fell victim to a pig butchering scam last year and lost $47 million of customer deposits, destroying retirement and nursing home funds in the process. AI represents a new front in the fight against scams too, something I've already talked about in the context of romance scams. Voice impersonation scams are increasingly commonplace too, such as a scammer who recently impersonated Marco Rubio to target senior US government officials. All this has bred a deep resentment towards scammers, even if we haven't been scammed personally, as we put ourselves in the shoes of victims and know how hard we've worked for our own money, or maybe imagine our own friends and relatives being scammed. In our minds, this makes them the lowest of the low and fair game for entertainment, as we take pleasure in any suffering exacted upon them, and justice is meted out to compensate for the failings of the establishment's justice system. It's guilt-free because it's righteous, much the same way a mob might kill a dictator after decades of oppressive rule. It makes us feel better because at least we're not out here scamming old ladies. We know it's something we would never do ourselves. And thanks to social media, we can watch this on demand, even as live streams. Scambaiting is maybe the most entertaining style of this content, involving luring in unsuspecting scammers and wasting their time. We get a little dopamine hit and reassurance that some justice is happening, even if on a small scale, as they become increasingly frustrated. The beta, master one even, will pose as a typical victim, normally an old person, and pretend to be frustratingly incompetent at completing the most basic tasks that the scammer asks of them. They'll do things like get distracted and try to make conversation with the scammer, which the scammer has little choice but to entertain, as they know it's important to building a rapport. This is essential to bringing a scam to fruition. The beta may even screen share themselves visiting a fake banking website, enticing the scammer with the large balance and tricking them into thinking they're about to win big. The best in this genre are the most convincing ones, good at doing accents and knowledgeable about the mannerisms of elderly people, avoiding exaggerating too much, which might arouse suspicion. They'll even express some skepticism towards the scammer, reflecting the fact that the average person is at least a bit aware of scammers. It would be suspicious if they blindly went along with them after all, as they're likely aware that there are people out there who seek to waste their time. Effective betas are able to make these interactions last hours, even tens of hours. Kitboga is one of the most popular and entertaining creators in this niche. In his most popular video, clocking in at 22 million views, he strings along a scammer for over 10 hours over 2 days. His target becomes the angriest scammer that's ever had the misfortune of crossing his path. This all starts with the scammer editing the HTML shown on the beta screen, in an attempt to trick the victim into thinking that a large amount of money has accidentally been transferred to them and that they need to transfer it back. Something that would come out of their real balance, a trick known as an overpayment or refund scam. This is thwarted by Kitboga unplugging his computer and from there, repeatedly dangling the prospect of a big payday in front of the scammer, only for it to slip through their fingers each time. The scammer attempts to get the victim to withdraw some physical money from the bank, which Kitboga pretends to do, but this plan ultimately falls apart. Kitboga then pretends to have an argument with his or her husband, they mess around with wire transfers, the scammer tries numerous different tactics to extract money, becoming increasingly agitated throughout. Eventually, they try gift cards, a favoured means of payment for scammers due to their ease of exchange and lack of restrictions around resale. Already filled with explosive rage by this point, Kitboga does the worst possible thing to a scammer when it comes to gift cards. He redeems the code instead of sending it to the scammer, reducing the chance of him receiving its value to precisely 0. This truly pushes the scammer over the edge, unleashing a tirade of anger and fury on who he believes to be an elderly, vulnerable woman. This is, of course, entertaining. It's easy to see why there's so many videos in this format, especially ones involving redeeming gift cards while the scammer watches on in horror. Many have been inspired to make content in this style, creating endless channels with varying degrees of sophistication, all messing with scammers to ruin their day and distract from attempts to rob people. All you need is a phone or computer and time to waste. This content feels guilt-free, it wastes time that could be spent scamming others and makes their quote-unquote job miserable. We don't have sympathy for Harry and Marv as they're repeatedly tortured by Macaulay Culkin during their break-in attempts after all. But unlike Harry and Marv, these criminals are normally in another continent, normally a developing country with fewer opportunities. The scenarios we see play out in these scams are an unintended consequence of our increasingly globalized societies. While the distance may be thousands of kilometers, communication is instant. Consumers in the West are accustomed to dealing with customer service representatives based in developing countries after all, the product of cost-saving efforts by corporations. According to India's 2011 census, the latest one for which data is available, 129 million Indians speak English. The number has likely grown substantially since then, given improvements in education. This has contributed to its position as a source of scams, alongside its low level of human development, low GDP, and other metrics of development, relative to the developed nations that the victims live in. This isn't to say we should have sympathy for scammers. To imply that because someone is from a less developed country, they can't help but scam people, is simplistic and takes away their agency, even if it's a seemingly compassionate take. The money stolen may seem like a lot to those scamming, but it's much less when factoring in purchasing power, the relative amount of goods that money buys in a specific context. The vast majority of people in developing countries are decent enough to not scam vulnerable people, even if they're overseas. Many resent the bad image that these scammers give their country, even if they represent a tiny minority that doesn't reflect their country as a whole. Unfortunately, scammers and the success of scam baiting videos has helped perpetuate this racist stereotype. Do Not Redeem in particular has become a meme used outside the context of these scam baiting videos, often towards Indians or those with Indian heritage in completely unrelated situations. Do Not Redeem It and Do Not Redeem the Card are two of the first results that show under a search for Do Not on TikTok. The results for Do Not Redeem It are full of straight up racism, or videos likely to attract racist comments, many including clips from Kitboga's videos. Many of these are made using AI. The amount of racist AI videos on TikTok in general is truly staggering, a topic that's already been covered a few times by creators such as Robert Tolpe. These videos show AI children saying the "do not redeem it" phrase with lazy stereotypes about hygiene thrown in too. It's even been made into a song. The phrase has been popularized to the extent that it's regularly commented on random videos with Indian people in, especially if those videos are calling out this normalized racism. And if you think this stays strictly online, the videos of TikTokers saying it to random people in the street indicate otherwise. Indians and those of Indian heritage have even spoke of experiencing racism from children. There's a general sense that anti-Indian racism is worse than it's been in recent memory. Now, do I fault Kitboga for all of this? No. There's nothing wrong with baiting a scammer who happens to be Indian and posting that footage online, especially if that scammer is willing to scam elderly, vulnerable people. The people making racist comments and posts are responsible for racism, and I hope these are a small proportion of Kitboga's audience, just as scammers are a small percentage of India's population. Scamming continues to be a major issue because of a lack of local police resources, or willingness, to tackle the perpetrators, while authorities in victims' countries have limited power to intervene. This is compounded by corrupt officials who can shield these scam centers from investigation. This all played a big role in Americans losing a staggering $16.6 billion to cyber fraud in 2024. These losses, and losses in other countries, have prompted scam investigators to step in, such as Jim Browning, mentioned at the start of this video. This generally requires a higher level of technical skill, as it normally involves hacking into the systems that these scam centers use, as opposed to simply wasting individual scammers' time. Jim is the top dog in this genre, having started his channel 11 years ago and blowing up a few years after. His productions have become increasingly sophisticated, such as a 5-part series he released a few years ago, which saw him hack into a scam call center and methodically accumulate evidence before shutting it down, even getting photos and details of the men who operated it. This ultimately became a collaboration with the BBC, who used the evidence that Jim accumulated to investigate the call center themselves, and even launched their own TV series in a similar vein. This subsequently drew the attention of Indian police and the arrest of its owner and accountant. In researching this video, I learned that Indian police generally aren't allowed to handcuff prisoners, hence why they're holding hands. Jim acknowledges he wouldn't have been able to achieve this on his own, and that it really required the extra media attention, as nothing had been done by Indian police following his previous investigations. But even after the arrest of the operators of this scam, they were out of jail only a few weeks later, and operating another scam center in the very same building, with the Indian government failing to pursue charges. There's recently been some indication that the Indian government is cracking down on scams in partnership with the US, but it's hard to tell how widespread and impactful it's been so far. Corruption and lax enforcement of laws also hinders the tackling of scam operations in parts of the world rarely covered by scam content, Southeast Asia. Maybe because those perpetuating the scam are often also victims. These scam centers are spread throughout the region, but concentrated in poorer countries such as Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. I couldn't find an exact one-to-one comparison, but it's possible that this is an even bigger source of scams than India, albeit ones of a different nature, generating more than $43.8 billion annually. While there's plenty of exceptions to the rule, different parts of the world tend to specialize in different types of scams. As I've covered in previous videos, West African countries such as Nigeria and Ghana are a hotspot for romance scams, where scammers extract money from victims who fall in love with a catfish. These are run much more informally than the tech support and banking scams most common in India, which are more call center style operations. But in Southeast Asia, crypto scams are often run in huge compounds by organized crime. These have become synonymous with quote-unquote pig butchering scams, although use of the term has been discouraged by Interpol as it induces stigma and shame. Instead, they advocate for the term romance baiting. Victims are deceived into investing large amounts of money, with fake crypto websites making them think they've made large returns to encourage them to continue investing more. These often contain a romantic element, enticing a lonely singleton with a catfish profile and introducing the quote-unquote investment once a connection has been established. The introduction often takes place via a wrong number message, something that you've probably encountered yourself. Those doing the scamming have often been trafficked under false promises and are trapped in the compounds, even being given electric shocks and beaten if they don't hit weekly targets. Hundreds of thousands are believed to be trapped in these centres, forced to scam. Recently, the Indian government rescued 250 of its citizens from them, highlighting the fact that you never know the circumstances under which scams across the world are taking place, unless you quite literally hack into them. This complicates the core part of scam content, its guilt-free essence. Scam content is enjoyable because the bad guy suffers, they cause the suffering of an innocent victim, so we get to enjoy watching them suffer in entertaining ways. And we incentivize the creators to continue doing this through ad revenue, donations, and maybe even merch. But what constitutes a bad guy? This comes down to an ethical judgment, one we presume to be simple, that the scammer is driven purely by greed. In many cases, even most, this is true. Scammers seek to accumulate wealth for themselves, well beyond what might be necessary to sustain themselves or their families. But what about those trafficked to scam compounds in Southeast Asia? Can we honestly say we wouldn't do the same if we truly had no other choice? And what about the middle ground, where we're not trapped per se, but the lack of opportunity makes scamming one of few means to make a living? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so let me know in the comments down below and hit those like and subscribe buttons while you're down there. I release a new video every couple of weeks. Until next time, see ya.